Okay, so I'm going to strive to emulate your nephew and think more Kavanah and less Devar. So, Pinchas, it is a very strange parsha, and I'm just going to run down a little bit of a few of the topics and then go from a story to an explanation. So Pinchas begins with God lauding Pinchas the Impaler. We were the first. Before Vlad the Impaler, we had Pinchas the Impaler. And of course, the question arises whether he was a hero or murderer or both. And that is a very rich topic to explore. Then we have the threatening war against Midian, where there is a census taken. And after that census, you would think that the Israelites would then go to war against Midian. But au contraire, there is a Torah tangent and a very meaningful one. We have something about the daughters of Tzlofchad, which I'll be mentioning, and the succession of Joshua to leadership, and then what we read today, which is a whole list of sacrifices. So what is going on here? Even Abraham ibn Ezra, who lived in the 12th century, he was a Spanish commentator, kind of did somersaults to say, oh, well, that's why it went to this topic, and that's why it went to that topic. We're not going to somersault with him. All I know is that it was not an easy thing for him to do. So let me start with a story, and then I think I can put that Torah tangent into some kind of context. And I say tangent because in the beginning of our next parsha, Matot, bless you, the war that they just did a census for is actually going to occur. So what's with the middle stuff? Why didn't we just go from a census, everybody who's military age, right to battle? There is a reason, potentially. Okay, so here's my story. The story was when I was in Israel last time, and I was volunteering, and I was picking peppers. And no, they weren't pickled, and no, nobody was named Peter Piper with the group of volunteers that I was working with, to my knowledge. But I was working with a very fierce Israeli bubby who was about my height, and we decided that what we needed to do, this was the last day the farmer could get his chili peppers picked. And so what we decided to do, being the shortest of the group, that we would go along the bushes and pick on the lower down branches where the taller volunteers had missed. So we are gleaning, basically, and we're picking our peppers, and we're talking about everything under the sun. We're talking about Trump. We're talking about trans, actually. We're talking about everything. And we ended up having a discussion about her family, which was enormous. She had umpteen children and even more umpteen grandchildren. And she was very interesting because she said, oh, she says, that's our hope. Having all of these children, all of these grandchildren, she said, in Israel, we live on hope. And she said, the more children, the more hope. And it kind of stuck with me, that idea that that was her one-word characterization of Israeli life, hope, tikva, right? And so this is going to connect up to our parsha, okay? It has been a rough time in Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers. We have had rebellions. We have had more rebellions. We have had violence. We have had, in our last parsha, 24,000 people dying of plague because God was really unhappy with the Israelites, okay? We have had Miriam dying. We have had Aaron dying. And Moses is going to meet his maker pretty soon after he gives his speech in the book of Deuteronomy. We have a whole lot of instability. If, Book of Numbers, I had a professor who once said the Book of Numbers is the most interesting book to read because even despite its lists, there's so much going on politically. It's very, very interesting. So they're pretty shaken up. They've been wandering for, 39 or so years in the desert. And they have just run into obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Now, After the census is done, there's a really interesting statement, the census for the war coming. And it said that no man actually who was in the old generation lived. They had all gone. And now we have a new generation. And this new generation is expressing tikva. So or hope, how do we know that? Well, the daughters of Tzlofchad, who is a man who passed away, they had no brothers, 5 women, all named, very unusual. Those women went to Moses and basically demanded, they weren't necessarily polite, they demanded that since they had no male heirs to their father's land, that they should receive it. Moses did not take this as a rebuke. He went right to God, and God said, the daughters of Tzlofchad are absolutely right. They get the land. So what made them not rebellious? Why did Moses take this to God? Because they were concerned about the future. They had the hope, maybe the faith that they were going to go in. This war that was coming up with Midian, they knew it was going to be okay. And what they were concerned about was the future. They were concerned about settling in the land. They were forward-looking, forward-thinking. They were invested in hope and faith. And Moses must have picked that up, and of course God as well. There was an ability to not be frightened of the future. There was an ability to be sure that there was going to be a land of Israel and they were going to inherit in some form or fashion. That's pretty powerful, and it might explain why the women's names are given. Basically, in Torah, if women's names are given, they've done something really good or really awful. And these women did amazingly good things. So that was a piece of hope, okay? The next, Moses is reminded that God is not happy and Moses will not lead the people into the land of Israel. What's Moses' response? Does he argue? Does he cry? No. He says, oh, but who's going to be their shepherd moving forward? Who's going to be their leader? He was concerned about the future. He was not concerned about his life. He understood this was a done deal. He wanted to move on. And his concern was fully about the future. He didn't argue about Joshua. They had their the ceremony of investiture, and this was the ideal, that this would be passed along to the next leadership, thinking about the future. And finally, that long list of sacrifices. What is that about? Well, that's God telling Moses to tell the whole people, remember the sacrifices. Well, guess where those sacrifices would be performed? In the land of Israel. So again, you have this idea, very different than the spies who thought and were worried that those people are giants compared to us and we can't overcome them. This was a surety. This is, I promise you, in the land of Israel, you will get there, you will have these sacrifices. The tabernacle will show up. So when we look at all of that, we see kind of a sea change in attitude. And it could be that the new generation, the more strong generation, is able to say, yeah, we're not afraid anymore. We're going to move forward. And although we Jews are known for many things, one of which is our excellence at kvetching, we're really good at that, it's very nice to be reminded that hope, whether it's the hope of this wonderful, fierce bubby I met while picking peppers, or the hope that we see in Torah itself, is a really powerful part of the Jewish experience. Shabbat Shalom.